I was atheist, so I didn't believe in God, higher power. I really rejected an idea that there is a deity or higher power, whatever you call it. Literally, like, I've experienced the worst thing. My father sexually abused me since age 8. Like, how much worse can it get, right? After that, I had an encounter with God and everything changed. And when somebody doesn't ask for your forgiveness, you don't owe them forgiveness. But what you owe yourself is to not carry that burden on you. And the only thing that goes in my head is God is real. God is real.
I think right now would be a perfect time to share that this podcast is officially sponsored. And this week's episode is brought to you by Juliana Barbati Consulting. Juliana is an expert in podcast SEO. She's worked with so many different podcasts and helped shows grow, helped shows get more eyes, helped shows get more ears, helped shows, get more followers. And I am honored to be working with her and have her team backing the podcast. So I'm very excited that they are the first advertiser to join the Round 2 podcast, first of many. So thank you, Juliana. And if you are looking for any sort of services to help your podcast grow, feel free to reach out to her. Her contact information is in the show notes. All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Round 2 podcast. I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and I am very excited to have this conversation today with my guest, Ana Megrelishvili.
Yay! You've got my name right.
Oh, yes. I feel so accomplished. I'm not even kidding.
Well, thank you so much, Nikki, for having me on your podcast.
You are welcome. I've said this many a times now since I joined Podmatch that I have just met the most fascinating people. And I'm so grateful that I joined the platform because otherwise, who knows, since people are from all over the world.
Absolutely. I feel like I already know you for such a long time. Like we just met and we're just catching up like old friends. So yeah, Podmatch has been a really great platform.
Yeah, it is so neat. I love that feeling when you meet someone and you're like, oh, I feel like we've talked before in some other version of ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like catching up with an old soul that I've known for a long time. So
thank you. The feeling's mutual. So how are you doing today?
Fantastic. Yeah. It is a little bit rainy in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm at, but it's all good. It's spring and, we welcome every weather.
Yeah. It's so funny. Everybody that I've recorded with over the last few days has been like, oh, it's finally spring here. And everyone's got that little like spring pep in their step.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I used to hate rainy weather and now I'm like, you know what? That's like feeding the earth, right? Like we need that. So be grateful for everything.
Yeah, definitely. And then all the beautiful flowers that come up after. I mean, April showers bring May flowers, right? So it's that time where the tulips are blooming and everything's out. Although it does kickstart my allergies quite significantly some days.
Yes, same here. Atlanta's notorious with the pollen.
Yeah.
Everything is green. So actually everybody's happy when it rains here because it
washes it all away.
Yeah.
I know. It's funny you say that because a couple of weeks ago, or maybe like a little over a week ago, there was one day where it rained and I was like, oh my God, thank God. Because my car, I felt like it's a white car and it literally looked yellow. There was so much pollen on it. I was like, dang. I was like, thanks for the free car wash, but I'm going to need to get that done. Oh, wow. Well, cool. Well, I'm really excited to have you here to share your story and learn more about you and what your journey has been like. So where are you originally from?
So I'm originally from Georgia, the country, which gets quite confusing because now I live in Georgia State. Sometimes when I say, it's so funny, when I say Georgia, the country, people think like the countryside of the state of, I'm like, where?
Funny. Yeah.
No, in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't know that there's a country that's called Georgia in Eastern Europe. So it just creates a lot of funny moments. But, my last name is so unique. And so that kind of clues people in that I am not from the US originally. But I came to the US in 2008 and I've been in Atlanta for the last 6 years and I love it here.
Okay, wonderful. So I think I mentioned this when we first met. I've heard that Georgian food is some of the most outstanding food, and it is very high on the top of my list more likely I'll find a restaurant somewhere in the US before I actually make it to the country, but you never know. But every time I see videos with people at a Georgian restaurant, I'm like, I want all of that.
So you actually will most likely find a really good Georgian restaurant in Thessaloniki when you go, because
Oh,
it has a pretty large Georgian population there.
oh my God.
So when you
Okay.
go, just look up Georgian restaurant and
Yeah.
definitely try. Yeah, I think Georgian cuisine is very unique.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the spices are hard to find in the US, so I actually bring
Oh,
them back every time I travel for
uh-huh.
when I cook here. But it's hard to describe, but I would say, like, imagine just like a mix of Mediterranean and Turkish and just unique, lots of
Mm.
just flavor, lots of like walnut sauce that we use in
Ooh, okay.
different dishes. So very healthy, lots of vegetarian options if people don't eat meat. So it's a very diverse cuisine. We are very self-sufficient when it comes
Uh-huh.
to like fruits and vegetables and meats. Like, so everything for the most part is local, organic. And so,
Yum.
food just tastes so much better in Georgia because of the
Yeah.
organic and just fresh food that you get from the local farms.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And it's so funny that you mentioned when I'm going to be in Greece because I have come across some account on Threads as of late, and it's giving all of these great like ChatGPT prompts for finding different experiences when you're out traveling. And I was like, oh my God, this is absolutely brilliant. And so I'm going to utilize a lot
Yeah.
of those on this next adventure to find those like local hidden places or places that like, maybe aren't showing up on Google because of whatever reason, but are still some of like hidden gems of the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Frankly, it's so interesting what you can do with ChatGPT, right? Like it just
Yeah.
kind of arrived in our lives. I
Mm-hmm.
recently had somebody who got connected with my organization from London, UK. And I said, well, how did you learn about us? And she said she just asked ChatGPT for like a
Wow.
Christian networking organization.
Uh-huh.
And our organization popped up, and that's how she got connected. So I was like,
That's so
all right,
cool.
ChatGPT is recommending us. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
that is super cool. It's so funny because it's like the bigger the world is, or the bigger the world feels, the smaller it actually is. And I mean, I noticed that every time I travel, and like even if I'm just like out to eat somewhere, like when I was in Poland last summer, I went to a restaurant and it turned out it was Russian. But like I was eating these dumplings, and it was just like all these different thoughts were going through my head because I'm like, I had dumplings that were similar to this, but
Mhm,
not exactly when I was in China. And I'm sitting here in Poland at a Russian restaurant, and I'm just like, mind is blown, but it made the world feel so small
mhm.
because of all of these different experiences. So it's
Yeah,
always like
absolutely.
fun. Yeah. Well, so great. So how did you end up in Atlanta?
Whew, okay, trying to put it together in a short version. When I was growing up in Eastern Europe, I grew up in a very kind of like dysfunctional, very poor upbringing. And I knew that I would do anything I can to get out of poverty and to make a better life for myself. And for a lot of good and bad that the US has, but for many countries outside of the United States, US is this beacon of hope,
Okay.
especially for women. When I was growing up in Eastern Europe, women's roles, especially in a small town where I was from, was more like imagine what US used to be like in like 1960s,
Mm-hmm.
70s for women. That's
Okay.
kind of where it was. For the most part, women were not expected to hold positions of power. They were more expected to be wives and mothers. And a woman at that point, and it was the same for me, I really had only two paths to get out of poverty. One path was to marry somebody up who is richer and, well off. But I've always seen only dysfunctional families around me. And I said, that's not a safe bet.
Uh-huh.
Or you had to really work hard on your education and try to get out of it. And so I
Okay.
chose that path. And so I really was the kind of child who read all the books, right? Like did a lot of competitions to try to get out of Georgia.
Okay.
And so I came to the United States for the first time when I was 16. I won a scholarship
Mm-hmm.
funded by the State Department. And I lived with this family in Colorado. And
Oh.
that was the first experience I've ever had of seeing what a loving, just healthy, functional family looks like. That where a woman had a voice and a decision-making capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw how much freedom women had in the US. And so So
Wow.
at that point, as a teenager, I knew I had to come back.
Uh-huh.
And I knew the only way for me to be back was to get full scholarship to go to
Okay.
college because my
Okay.
family was poor. I couldn't really afford to come to the US and pay for my education here.
Mm-hmm.
So I found one college in the US that if you apply as a foreign student and you got accepted, they not only provide you with full tuition scholarship, but they also pay for your room and board because that
Wow.
also costs a lot. And I could
Yeah.
afford that. They gave you a job on campus. They paid for your health insurance. So I applied to literally just one college and
Mm-hmm.
I got accepted. And
Oh
so
my
in
gosh.
2008 was when I immigrated to the US at
Mm-hmm.
age 20.
Okay.
And I lived in the small town in Kentucky to go to
Uh-huh.
college.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so that was an interesting experience coming from Eastern Europe to Kentucky, but it was absolutely phenomenal to graduate with a business degree with no student debt. And then
Yeah.
I pursued my master's of business with also full scholarship at University of Kentucky. And so I'm forever grateful to the
Mm-hmm.
US because, I went through entire process of getting a green card and then applying for citizenship took me over 10 years, but
Uh-huh.
I knew that my dream was to be here. And
Uh-huh.
so to overcome the poverty, wealth acquisition became my motivator. And that's originally how I came to the US.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. That's even so interesting that, well, number one, I did not know that a college like that existed. And number two, that you were able to find that like through your, research to then say, okay, I'm going to just go for it and apply. So at that school, what percentage of the attendant or what percentage of the students were foreign?
So 100% of students who go there are on scholarship. So it's a
Oh,
very unique college. It's called Berea College, and
okay.
it's an incredible institution. And so 10% of the student body are foreign students. It's highly competitive, as you can imagine.
I bet.
There's
Yeah.
over 3,000 applicants per spot that's
Uh-huh.
open from all over the world. And international students have almost 99% graduation rate at that college,
Yeah.
which
That
as
is a true testament. Wow.
yeah. And so it's been really incredible experience and I'm forever grateful for this opportunity.
For sure.
And, I pursued business degree because again, wealth acquisition was my primary motivator. I wanted to make a lot of money. I went into sales
Mm-hmm.
because especially in the US, if you're really good in sales, you can make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for about 10 years and it was very interesting. So how I ended up in Atlanta was for a job.
Okay.
And this job has opened up next level of income for me. So I've tripled my income by the time I left my
Wow.
corporate job. Nikki, like many immigrants, and I was no exception, we have this dream of like purchasing a property in the US, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
for us, like for me, it was I wanted a beautiful condo in the middle of the city overseeing the skyscrapers. Like
Mm-hmm.
I felt like if I achieved that, I have made it.
Uh-huh.
And so imagine my life goal for over 10 years was that. And I purchased my condo in March of 2020, literally 2 weeks before COVID
Oh
hit.
my gosh.
And I immediately started renovating. So I purchased it, immediately demolished the whole thing to renovate it the way
Okay.
it needed to look, spent thousands of dollars, right? And then COVID hits, this crazy time. Somehow my renovations gets done. I move in and I'm sitting on my couch a month later and drinking coffee and the thought creeps in, now what?
Mm.
And what I realized is that what I've been working toward for over 10 years and
Mm-hmm.
I accomplished has only brought me happiness for 1 month. And
Yeah.
after that, that emptiness that I felt returned.
Interesting.
And I knew at that moment this was unsustainable. I cannot continue my life with the same mindset of working long hours, acquiring the next big whatever dream, right? Because you can always go bigger. There's always bigger
Mm-hmm.
house, bigger car, keeping up with the Joneses, so to say.
Right.
And I said,
Right.
I don't want to live my life this way. There has to be more to life.
Uh-huh.
And I think that really was the moment that opened up a little bit of my mind to start seeking what's beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people have that, right? If you don't have a purpose that's truly fulfilling and meaningful beyond things that
Material
will
things.
bring, material things that will bring you
Yeah.
temporary happiness,
Mm-hmm.
you're just seeking that. And back then, like my entire life, I want to preface it too. I was atheist. So I didn't
Okay.
believe in God, higher power. I really rejected an idea that there is a deity or higher power, whatever you call it,
Okay.
because I said, if God exists and he allowed for all these horrible things to happen to me as a child,
Oh,
then I want to
okay.
do nothing with this God. I
Okay.
rejected that idea.
So I was going to ask when you said that, because I know that there's a lot of religion in Eastern Europe.
Mhm,
I mean, I don't know, is Georgia primarily Orthodox
mhm.
or okay.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
So that is surprising saying that when you said you grew up mostly atheist, that's surprising, but it sounds like there's much more layers to that.
Right. Well, and if you ask a lot of Georgians and people in other countries who have Orthodox Christianity as the main religion,
Hmm.
pretty much 90% or so will say that they're Christians. Oh, of course, yes, I'm Orthodox Christian, but they don't really understand what it means. So it's a lot of it is cultural Christianity because my
Okay.
parents are Christians. So the belief is every baby gets baptized when they're a child,
Hmm.
right? Because they believe that that brings you salvation. But my family was no different.
Hmm.
My family went to church for Easter and did the rituals associated
Yeah.
with that. But they did it because that's what you're supposed to do. And that's what my parents did and grandparents did, not because they never explained to me who Jesus was, what he did for us. Like I had
Interesting.
no idea. And so this was no
Okay.
different. And I looked when I was growing up, going to church was cool suddenly.
Oh,
And so
okay.
my classmates, like they would make announcements that they're going to a church service and they would dress up and then they would like make it known to everybody that they're fasting for Easter. And so
Hmm.
I saw this fakeness and I said, like, this is like, you can feel it, right? When people are
Yeah.
doing it for the wrong reasons. And I said,
Hmm.
like, I don't understand this. This is all fake. Let me also say a couple of things. So in Georgia, there's still a lot of like old rituals and traditions. Like I'll give you
Uh-huh.
one example. Women are not allowed to go into church when they are on their periods.
What?
Yeah,
But how
I'm
would
not kidding.
anybody know?
I'm not kidding.
That's crazy.
So I mean, and the things like that, and that didn't make sense to me. And I was like, if God created me and he made women to have periods and he also wants us to go to his house, which is church,
Yeah.
why would he prevent women from going into church 1 week out of the month? So like a
Right.
lot of things like this, like when I was growing up, there were still animal sacrifices that happened quite
Oh.
often
Oh.
in the church. Like people would basically, was a lot like, oh God, if you do this for us, I promise I will
Oh.
sacrifice this lamb. And so people would literally take lambs to the special church and the priests would slaughter the lamb and prepare. I mean,
Oh.
it's, yeah, I was growing up with all of this and I was like, what is this? Like, I don't, this is
Yeah.
crazy. I don't want to do anything with it. So I completely rejected anything with when it came to Christianity.
Okay. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I certainly love eating lamb as a dish, but I don't think that I would want to be at church and watch it get slaughtered in the church as like an offering for some other good that somebody was hoping
Right.
for.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I saw a lot of it and I was like, this is man made. I don't know what it is, but I don't want to do
Mhm.
anything in regards to that.
Yeah.
So when I came to US, like in the US, it's quite easy to not be associated with any religion whatsoever,
Mhm.
much easier than it is in Georgia. Because in Georgia, there's a lot of like visible things that people do. So I'll give you an example. People do the cross
Oh,
if
uh-huh.
they go by the church. So
Oh,
you'll see
okay.
people just constantly doing the crossing because there's churches everywhere.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
every time you see a church, right? In the US, a lot of it is not so ritualistic, right?
Mhm.
It's more about the relationship with God. And so it was super easy for me to just ignore my faith, and I didn't
Mhm.
have any.
Okay.
I had an encounter with God and everything changed. But really,
Okay.
that moment of unfulfillment from the purchase, I think that was the crack that God needed to move in my life.
What a journey. I mean, and so when you were feeling all of these ways when you were a child and in your younger years, as
Mhm.
you're seeing all of this and observing and having your own opinions and thoughts about everything that was happening, were you able to speak with your family and like ask questions, or is that kind of not how it works?
So, my family is not the best example of communication whatsoever. So, my upbringing was fear based.
Oh.
So, there was a lot of violence in my family. So, anytime you had to navigate the family dynamic based on my father was an abusive alcoholic. So,
Oh.
you had to navigate around like, what kind of mood is he in today?
Oh,
You
okay.
always tried to be quiet and like in your room and out of the way, not rock the boat. And,
Mm-hmm.
it was very interesting. Like the dynamic between my parents, they were also psychologically abusive in a sense, like my father constantly pretended he was about to kill himself and my mother was
Oh,
saving him. But it was
geez.
all like, as a child, I was a teenager. It's like, this is all fake. Like, he's grabbing the
Oh.
dullest knife. Like, he's not going to kill himself.
Oh
And,
gosh.
and then my mom is like saving, and there's all these things, and I'm observing it. But it's so interesting, based back to communication. This scene would happen. They will get their hit of this psychological dependency, and then they
Yeah.
would never talk about it. They would go on about the day like it was normal. Nothing just
Oh
happened.
my gosh. Wow.
It was so bizarre. And
Yeah.
yeah, so trust me, nothing like this was ever communicated. Like I cannot,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I mean, and it's, I'm laughing along with you because you're laughing at about it now, but I'm sure as a kid you were like, what the hell is going
I
on
mean,
around
it was
here?
crazy, right? Like just observe it. Like I would remember like back then I was like, how does my mother not see this? Like this is like fake. He's just doing
Yeah.
this to get a reaction out of her. I mean,
Yeah.
it was craziest thing ever. Yeah, there's so many stories. Like we don't have time for it, but I laugh at it now. But like this is a reality for many, many children growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Experiencing abuse within their family, not knowing how to process it.
Yeah.
And carrying it into their adult lives. Like I went through years of different types of therapy to now be able, literally, you can ask me any question and I'm able to talk about it, not get
Uh-huh.
emotional, process it,
Yeah.
share it, right? Hopefully inspire others to get some healing
Yeah.
from their childhood. But it's a journey. Healing,
Uh-huh.
healing is a journey.
Oh my gosh, definitely. And it's interesting that you brought that up about being able to talk about it all without, emotion, or being able to talk about it comfortably and like not start crying and be able to,
Mhm.
just tell the story, because you have now got yourself to a point where, you've let go of that tension and that energy and that pain to be able to say like, yes, this is part of my story, but it's not like it hasn't defined me and I'm not like holding on to it as this like, oh, poor me, who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's so interesting. People who really learn the full story and really the depth of suffering that I've gone through, they say things like, oh, I have not experienced nearly as much as you have. So they almost like apologize that they don't share the same kind of trauma. And I was like, that's great. Like, I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah.
happy that you didn't. And plus, like,
Yeah.
you never want to compare, because two people could experience pretty much the same event in different families, but they will
Mhm.
respond completely different based on their character and personality. And
Mhm.
so, it's never at all competition or
Right,
comparison.
right.
And I also, have the strength now to talk about it, where I know a lot of people are not quite there yet. And
Mhm.
so if I can pave the way for them, really to let them know, listen, no matter what you're going through, like I promise you, you're not alone. Somebody else in this world
Yeah.
most likely is experiencing similar thing.
Mhm.
Um, there is a light after this whole darkness, and
Mhm.
you could truly tap into that pain. So I had to make a choice. I didn't want my pain to be purposeless. Because imagine if I went through everything I went through and then I would allow it to have a hold on me, have this victim mentality for me, then I'm giving the power to my abuser, and then he
Totally.
won.
Yeah.
And I just refuse for that to happen.
Mhm.
I want for whatever I went through to shape my character, which of course it has, for better or for worse, right? We have
Yeah.
triggers and we have the strength that comes from our pain. But I'm tapping into my pain to be my source of strength.
Mhm.
Because nothing can happen to me today. Literally, like I've experienced the worst thing. My father sexually abused me since age 8.
Oh.
Like, how much worse can it get, right? After
Oh,
that.
I don't know, because that sounds horrific.
I mean, the person who was supposed to love and protect you was the one who
Yeah.
hurt you the most, right?
Oh.
Like, I've recovered. Like, I've gone through the point where I have completely shed any resentment. So I want to make one thing clear. My father never asked for my forgiveness. And when somebody doesn't ask for your forgiveness, you don't owe them forgiveness. But what you owe yourself is to not carry that burden on you.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've gone through is not the forgiveness process, it's the process of shedding all that weight and feeling nothingness toward my abuser. So
Uh-huh.
I don't feel any negative nor positive feeling toward my father. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't justify his behavior because it's inexcusable what he did, but
Yeah.
I also don't allow it to affect me anymore. I actually use it to talk with other survivors of child sexual abuse,
Mm-hmm.
to talk them through their trauma, help them in any way that I can, because we all have patterns of
Mm-hmm.
behavior that comes from that trauma.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I am so sorry that you had to deal with that. I'm sure I'm not the first person that said that. But wow, that is awful. How many years did it happen for?
So from age 8 till age 13.
Oh my God. And were you an only child or are you an only child?
I'm not. So my brother was 7 years, is 7 years younger. So he was a baby when,
Mm-hmm.
it started. He was about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think I've asked my brother, and from what I know, he has not experienced it. Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But the fear of abuse was what prevented me from ever telling what was happening to me, and it happens to
Oh.
a lot of survivors. On average, statistically, it takes a survivor of child sexual abuse about 20 to 25 years before they will actually publicly say to
Wow.
another person that happened to them.
Wow, really?
So that's on average. So some people
Oh,
take this to their grave. It's such a
yeah.
shameful thing that we carry. We feel a lot of shame and guilt.
Oh.
It's very difficult to get out of it. And
Uh-huh.
really, the identity of the traumatic experience and our own identity gets so intertwisted. It's
Uh-huh.
very difficult to separate the two. And so,
Yeah.
what you keep hearing, and there's certain patterns that emerge out of it. Promiscuity is one of the effects of
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
or opposite, people go just very unhealthy relationship,
Yeah.
alcohol or drug abuse. Or what people don't realize, that was me, because I felt inadequate and
Mm-hmm.
shame. I actually went the opposite. So I became an overachiever to the point
Oh,
where
uh-huh.
I would make myself sick every year because I would not allow myself to rest anytime. So, like, I'll give you an example
Oh,
so you understand how
interesting.
extreme I would take it.
Uh-huh.
I was never allowed to watch, just sit down and watch a movie or a TV show. The
Oh.
only time I would allow myself to do it if I was doing something else productive at the same time. So,
Mm-hmm.
ironing clothes, cooking dinner. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to be doing something else in order for me to allow myself to watch something. So
Wow.
imagine going from the morning until you go to sleep,
Just
100%
nonstop.
nonstop.
Yeah.
I would literally get so sick every year. That would be the only time I would allow myself to rest. So my
Wow.
body just forced me
Yeah,
to rest.
yeah.
And
Well, and geez, no wonder you had the wherewithal to find a school countries away, apply against all of this competition, get in because you were just this hyper achiever
yeah.
and also probably wanting to just escape your reality.
Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
really divide my life before and after I came to the US. And sometimes
Mhm.
it's so interesting just talking about the past.
Mhm.
It's sometimes it's like, wow, did that really happen to me? Because it
Mm.
just seems so far away.
Yeah, it's like you're telling somebody else's
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like one of healing practices is this therapy called EMDR, and
Okay.
it's used most commonly with veterans who come back from the combat.
Okay. Okay.
So what it
That's
does,
the was the first thing that popped into my head
yeah,
when you said
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
What it does, it helps with a lot of obviously PTSD symptoms, but more so, it literally separates your identity from your trauma.
Oh.
So during the therapy, I literally had to go in very detail, feel the emotions, and
Mm.
really experience every traumatic thing. And
Uh-huh.
basically, through it, then it started slowly chipping at separating. And it almost like when I tell the story now, it's mentally, I understand that it happened to me, but
Uh-huh.
emotionally, it's like I am telling somebody's story. So it's like it's
Interesting.
some other Anna
Uh-huh.
experienced it, even though I
Yeah.
understand it was me.
Wow.
Mhm.
So how many years did it take for you to share this with someone?
So I was already in my 20s when I first time shared it with my mother. So my
Okay.
mother finally divorced my father after I left the country. So
Okay.
I've been begging my mother to divorce my father since I was 12 and she would not.
Oh,
And so I was kind of her emotional crutch for
okay.
we had a reversal of roles in many ways where
Oh,
I was the mother, she was the child, and I was the
uh-huh.
emotional crutch. Well, suddenly that emotional crutch decided to escape and change the life
Yeah.
and leave the country. Well, that unraveled their relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
so she finally got to the point where he almost killed her
Oh,
physically, and
geez.
then she decided to divorce him. So only after he was out of the picture I
Mm-hmm.
had the courage to tell my mother what happened.
God, and
But
what was her
interesting,
reaction?
we don't have enough time for this podcast, but it's an
Okay.
interesting thing that my mother never apologized for her role.
Jeez.
And we actually don't have communication now anymore
Mm.
because she never basically took responsibility for her role in the abuse of her children.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh.
very tough because when you break, so like I explain it this way, in every family and every relationship, it's like a dance. It's a
Uh-huh.
psychological dance, and both parties know the steps, and you keep dancing this. And when suddenly, like me, I changed the dance steps because I went
Mm-hmm.
through the healing process. I realized we have unhealthy dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other person gets angry because you changed the steps on them.
Okay.
And my mother was no exception. She got angry and I set the boundaries. And I said, no, if you want to have a relationship with me, you need to either learn this new steps or we
Mm-hmm.
no longer can dance together.
Yeah.
And she refuses to learn the new dance steps.
Wow.
So this is the reality. If then I have a choice to either return to the previous dance or keep
Mm-hmm.
my new, right? And so I
Yeah.
choose healthier, stable me, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to go back to the unhealthy dynamic. And so
Yeah.
down the road, who knows, maybe she decides that she wants to learn the new dance steps with me and we'll
Yeah.
reconcile. But until then, it's I choose my health and my
Mm-hmm.
psychological well-being ahead of
Yeah.
functionality.
I mean, as you should. I mean, and how brave of you to speak on this, you know? I mean, if 25 years is the average, I mean, I feel like you're what brings it down to those 25 years from all those people that just never say a word. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that must have been so scary, but also such a relief to finally at least tell her and, ask any questions that you had to ask, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we really were able to go deep because my mother doesn't have emotional intelligence to really process a lot of the conversations and things. And she has a lot of like narcissistic
Yeah.
personality traits, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's very difficult to communicate in a healthy way, but nothing is impossible. I
Yeah.
pray that she decides one day that she wants to grow and learn
Mm-hmm.
and have conversation with me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also healthy for me to accept her as she is.
Mm-hmm.
So I've really, accepted it, and it's difficult. And it's so interesting, you always feel like you're the only one, right? You hear like I don't have any relationship with my parents, and I felt like there was something wrong with me for the longest time.
Mm.
And since I started publicly like telling the truth and what's going on, I was shocked how many people first came to me that I've even known that
Mm.
also experienced child sexual abuse, and then some people who also don't have relationship with their parents.
Wow.
And so I feel like there's a lot of stigma around this topics,
Mm-hmm.
so that's why I want to talk about it. And it's
Yeah.
interesting how many people have been coming up. I've had a 60-plus-year-old man who
Wow.
suddenly decided after I shared my experience and he heard me and he told me his experience as a child, which he's
Wow.
never told anybody else
Oh my gosh. I
in
bet
his
that was such
60s.
a huge moment for him.
Exactly. So then to me, it's like,
Wow.
okay, if nothing everything else, if I keep just talking about it and people feel like there's nothing wrong with them, because we
Yes.
don't feel like we're normal, like, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
use quotation marks, like we always feel like there's something wrong with us, but
Yeah.
there isn't.
Yeah.
We just
No,
carry.
that is so beautiful. And like truly, I mean, having this conversation with you and hearing why you are speaking out and why you're talking about things, want to share this life story of yours is literally the reason why I want to do this. I do this podcast is because if there's just one person that listens to any of the amazing stories that I'm fortunate enough to tell and feels like, oh my God, somebody else had the same life that I did, or somebody else feels this way too, or somebody else, you fill in the blank, then that's the best.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
exactly, like, you found your purpose. You are helping
Hmm.
people.
Oh my gosh. So did you cut off communication with your dad when you moved to the US?
I did. So I have not communicated with him since then, and I don't feel like I owe him that,
Yeah.
and I've
I
done
mean,
the
I
work
would.
of
Yeah.
letting go. And, I don't wish him, trust me, I've gone through all the stages. Like, anger
Hmm.
stage is the longest stage of the traumatic experience. And in my anger stage, I can share how many, like, I've killed my father in my thoughts
I
many different
bet.
ways, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of survivors get stuck in anger stage. That's like the
Hmm.
hardest and the longest stage of grief that
Yeah.
we go through. That really, hypnotherapy is what helped me to get out of it, because
Oh.
the anger sits so deep within us, we don't even
Uh-huh.
realize we have it. And so hypnotherapy brings from your subconscious onto the
Uh-huh.
surface so you can deal with that, because it's hard to deal with something you don't know you have.
Hmm.
Um, Speaking of that, let me tell you something that I think will explain, like, how sometimes trauma, we don't even understand that our decision making gets affected by it. So up until about 4 years ago, I did not want to have children. And
Okay.
I truly thought this was my identity based on, like, just logical explanation. I don't want to have children because I don't want to change my lifestyle. And there's many reasons why I justify I didn't want to have children.
Hmm.
And then I had an unexpected breakthrough in my healing journey. Imagine when you just flip the light switch.
Yeah.
That's how the feeling from not wanting to have children flipped, and suddenly I longed for motherhood.
Hmm.
And I'm not sharing this because I believe that every woman is supposed to be a mother. That's not the
Yeah.
point. The point is, I had no idea that
Hmm.
trauma was dictating my decision making.
Yeah.
And suddenly, breakthrough in the healing changed everything in my life.
No, that's fascinating.
And so I shared this because it's a very personal story, but I shared this because I want every survivor of whatever you go through in your childhood, doesn't have to be the specific trauma, to go through healing, because we might not even realize that
Yeah.
this traumatic experience is affecting our identity and our decision making.
Hmm.
And we deserve better. We deserve to make the decisions based on what we truly want and who we truly
Yeah.
are, not because of what happened to us.
Absolutely. That is so, I love that you have put in so much time to do all this work on yourself to, release everything that's settled into your tissues and your bones and your subconscious, and got to, like you said, got to layers of yourself that you didn't even realize was down there. Because that, it's so crazy, the timing of these shows, because I just sat and spoke with someone yesterday, and she was talking about just that, and like releasing like all of this different tension from your body and from all of your life experiences. And if the way that we naturally will deal with things if we end up going into like self-protect mode or fight or flight mode, and maybe like you said, like there's so many things that just get stuck and buried in us and we don't even necessarily know that they're there.
Yeah.
And so for you to have that realization, I think is so great. I mean, it's so great, period, that you were, because you're just continually bettering yourself
Mhm.
and working to be the best person and not let this awful tragedy and traumatic time period of your life dictate your future,
Mhm.
but that you're actually acknowledged, like, oh, whoa, like this wasn't my actual truth speaking. This was
Mhm.
all of this stuff. And when I worked so hard to get rid of all that stuff, now I can see who I truly am and what I truly want.
Yeah, and I don't want listeners to think that I feel like I've overcome everything and I've conquered it all,
No.
because healing is a journey, and all you
Mm-hmm.
need to go care about is to compare yourself who you were yesterday, because it's
Yeah.
always a work in progress. I still, have things, and I'm sure I'll uncover more things. And, I got even deeper. So, I have been atheist, and then I had this encounter with God, and
Mm-hmm.
I went through a homeless woman in Atlanta, actually suddenly knew
Really?
that God was real. So it was a really
Okay.
interesting encounter. But the
Well, you're
the
going to tell me the encounter though, right?
oh, do you want me to? Okay, I
Yeah,
will.
yeah. I'm so intrigued by stuff
Okay,
like this. This is so neat.
okay. So, crazy things, right? I've never prayed. And one night, this is October of 2020,
Mm-hmm.
I wake up like 3 a.m., wide awake, and I just feel compelled to pray for the first time in my life. And I don't really know how
Interesting.
to pray.
Uh-huh.
So I say something like, God, if you exist, why do
Mm-hmm.
I feel this way? Like, why do I feel like something is missing? There has to be more to life. What's my purpose? Like all these things
Yeah.
that came from that condo purchase, right?
Uh-huh.
And suddenly I hear a voice in my room, audible voice, and it
Uh-huh.
says, go to the store, prepare food, feed the hungry. That's it. That's all I hear.
Okay.
So, of course, like freaking out, like, am I dreaming? All of this,
Yeah.
as you can imagine, everything is going through my head. But the
Sure.
next morning, I actually didn't go to work. I called in and took a personal day. I went to the store. I bought all the supplies. I made 24 bags of lunches.
Okay.
And I started driving in downtown area of Atlanta, because downtown area is where a lot of the people who experience homelessness are.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I would see somebody in the street, I would stop, offer lunch, and just kept going and going and going. And then
Uh-huh.
an hour later, I come across this big group of people in the street, and I park my car, I count them, and then I count how many bags of lunches I have left. And I kid you not, I have exact number of lunches
Oh
left.
my
And I was like,
gosh.
oh, that's weird. So I
Yeah.
take this whole big bag, walk over there, and I say, hey guys, brought you some lunch. They're happy. I give them all out. I think I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Was about to get in my car, and suddenly one of the homeless ladies calls me and she says, hey honey, come over here. I have something that I want to give you. I have a gift for you.
Okay.
I was like, okay. So she has this big bag of all of her belongings. And so she's looking and looking and looking for this thing that she wants to give me. Well, suddenly then she pulls this little bird made of clay
Mm-hmm.
and gives it to me with this big smile. And I
Okay.
looked at it, and it's a sparrow. And
Okay.
if you're Christian, sparrow has a lot of biblical meaning in the Bible. And this sparrow has this written on its chest, and it says, now in God's hands.
Oh my gosh.
And so I read this, Nikki, and I just burst into tears. Like I am sobbing, like ugly
Yeah.
crying, sobbing. I get embarrassed. I get in the car and I just sobbing. And the only thing that goes in my head is God is real. God is real. God is talking to me.
Wow.
God is real.
Oh my
And yeah, and
gosh.
so like I purchased my first Bible from Amazon that day,
Mm-hmm.
and then started like studying the Bible, started going to church. Almost a year later I got baptized. Like everything transformed really. December 31st of 2022. No, it
Okay.
was January 31st, actually. January 31st of 2022. I wake up and my entire family in Eastern Europe is in national news. I get all these notifications. My 82-year-old grandfather ends up stabbing his son, my uncle, 30 times in his sleep with a knife.
Whoa.
Like, think of like crazy town, right? Like,
Yeah.
I see this news where
Oh,
my grandfather is in handcuffs. They're
oh my
interviewing him.
God.
So basically, what ends up happening, abuser, which was my grandfather, who was abusing my father, all his other children. He had four children. My uncle grew up, and the abused became the abuser. So then he started abusing my grandfather until he slapped
Oh my
and ended
God.
up killing his own son.
Oh
So
my God. Whoa.
yeah, you can't make this up. So the next day, I went in and I gave my 2-week notice and I quit my corporate job.
Uh-huh.
And I actually went on this incredible 10-month sabbatical journey, which you can make a whole podcast just from the sabbatical because it was
I
just so
bet.
many moments. But throughout that time, I did a lot of healing. I traveled to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of countries. I've traveled like to 12 countries in 6 months.
Nice.
Then I started going on silent retreats. And
Okay.
so during my first silent retreat, I actually wrote everything that I've experienced in two
Oh.
days. And so I actually published my book, Finding Courage to Change,
Oh my
after
gosh.
that silent retreat, just in 2 days, wrote everything down.
Dang. That's amazing. Gosh, now
Yeah.
I should go be quiet for 2 days and see what comes out of me.
So silent retreats, I do a whole podcast just on silent retreats sometimes
Okay.
because I've
Yeah.
done 8 in the last 2.5 years.
Uh-huh.
So this is now part of my life. And so first one, I wrote a book. Second one, I actually received a vision what my purpose was. So everything that I'm doing now came from
This is
that
so
retreat.
cool.
It's
Okay,
such,
you're gonna have to come back and do a whole episode on silent retreats
oh,
because
trust me,
now
like,
I'm so intrigued.
yeah, there's enough, like, I can share like exactly like the technique, like how to do it, like
Yeah.
what you will experience. Like it's incredible. But
Whoa.
sometimes you never know where the silent retreat will take you. So I'll give you an
Mm-hmm.
example of my very last one. So on the last one that I went a few months ago, I had to make a lot of like business decisions. And so I
Mm-hmm.
thought I would go and I can decide like what I need to do next. And literally God gives me nothing in regards to that, but he's working on my character. So
Hmm.
that job that I quit, God showed me how much disruption I caused to that business by leaving.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And so 4 years later, I emailed the owners of the company with an apology. I said,
Wow.
I just realized, probably thought, I don't know. They responded very nicely, but I can
Yeah.
only imagine like
Yeah.
later, my employees emailing me apologizing for what they've done. But they
Oh
were
my
very, very
gosh.
kind, responding,
Uh-huh.
saying that they thanked me for that apology letter. But
Wow.
yeah, it was just more character building than anything else. So I feel like
Interesting.
faith journey also builds your healing and your character.
Mm-hmm.
It reflects a lot of your behavior. So, like, I'll give you an example of just some aha moment that happened to me during my kind of like the faith growth. It was really toward the beginning of when I became a Christian. So I used to send money to support my mother and my brother when I
Mm-hmm.
first immigrated to the US. And this is an cultural expectation,
Mm-hmm.
but also like I just felt like this was what I had to do and what I needed to do. And it was very interesting. Like anytime I would share with people in the US, like, oh yeah, I support my entire family back home,
Uh-huh.
people will say things like, oh, it's so kind of you and you're so generous and all these things, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, I'm such a good person for doing.
Yeah.
And then, so listen to this. Like I'm in my prayer and meditation, and suddenly I realized that the true reason why I was doing it was to quiet my guilt
Oh, guilt for what? Leaving?
for leaving and having a
Okay.
better life than they do.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I was paying to quiet my guilt, not
Interesting.
because I was a good person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but God, knowing your story, there's like absolutely no reason you should have felt guilty for leaving, but maybe guilty for leaving them behind or whatever. But
Yes, yes.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. What a journey you've been on.
Yeah, it was yeah, almost feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes in one.
Seriously.
'Cause, yeah, even that, when I came to the US and until I became a Christian, it was really a different life. Now
Mm-hmm.
everything has changed. My
Yeah.
career, I
Mm-hmm.
never knew I was gonna, run a Christian organization that's
Yeah.
solve homelessness in this country. I was never passionate about homelessness. Like if I
Uh-huh.
were to pick a topic, it would have been eradicating child sexual abuse because that's what
Mm-hmm.
I personally went through.
Sure.
But, when God tells you and shows you what your purpose is, you have a choice at that point to say yes or no. And I chose yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been an incredible journey, just where we're going and just seeing the transformation that we've been causing in our city, and hopefully soon soon in Tampa, Florida, where we're opening our second chapter. And
Awesome.
who knows where else, right? Hopefully
Yeah.
coming soon to a location near you.
Wow. I mean, what a journey, and how, I mean, gosh, all these interesting, not all of them are interesting moments, but geez, these post getting here and working through your trauma and working on your healing. And I'm always blown away by when, and I believe it now to be so real because I've talked to so many different people about, how when we open up and are allowing like things with our intuition, and there's, so many spiritual things that can transpire and take place, whether it's with God or with someone who's passed on, and them passing on messages and seeing signs and doing all these different things. I mean, what a moment for that homeless woman to give you that little sparrow that happened to say what it said on it after, the morning after you got this message. I mean, did you like jump up out of bed and like look underneath the bed and in your closet when you heard the voice, thinking like, what the heck is going on?
My mind is pretty like logical, right? Like I'm
Uh-huh.
very analytical in a sense. And so I was like, okay, did I dream this? And I was like, no, I'm wide
Yeah.
awake, like for
Yeah.
sure. I did not dream this. And I was like, did I really hear the voice? Like, was it inside of, no, it wasn't inside of me. Like, it was like, but the feeling that you feel, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's undeniable. It
Mm-hmm.
just shakes you, right? It shook me to the point that imagine I took a day off the following day to follow this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That is so neat. I
you
mean,
can't deny this.
well, and think about how many people would have heard that and then just kind of got up the next morning and been like, okay, that was crazy, and just gone to work and then like told coworkers and like, oh my God, guess what happened last night? But like you didn't act on it, but you decided to act on it, which I think is extra cool.
So this is what I think. I think God works in a different way with different people. So I
Mm-hmm.
think with me, he knew he had to do something like this because
Yeah.
no, I hear a lot of just based on sharing my story and hearing other people's stories. No people have the same story. It's always
Right.
very unique. So I think he's the author of everything. So he crafts his relationship with each person however that person needs it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so hardened by life and so rejecting of God that I think he knew with me he had to do something so drastic for me to
Yeah.
like literally wake up and
Yeah.
and be like, okay, something did happen. And I've been really lucky to have these experiences at the beginning, but I also want to preface that I started going to silent retreats after my first two because I
Mm-hmm.
was craving this presence of God.
Mm-hmm.
But God is not a magician who like you just ask and he gives you all these tricks, right? But I
Right.
feel like I was treating him like that. And so when I went on my third silent retreat, it was so interesting because it was quietness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting really frustrated about it because I was like expecting the first two, right? Where it's like all these
Oh.
things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost like third or fourth day. And I was just sitting in this quietness in the garden. And I was like, okay, God, like, just tell me what I need to know. Like, I'm frustrated. I don't hear anything. And suddenly there's this just whisper that it's within me this time. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's, and God speaks and he says, no more signs will be given to you. Now that
Oh.
your faith is strong enough, you have to seek my voice in quiet places.
Okay. Wow.
And so since then, it's exactly what happened. I have not experienced any big signs or any visions or anything like this because, I guess my faith is strong enough based on God's
Interesting.
message. But
Wow.
it comes in this quiet voice. That's exactly so. You have to quiet your mind. You have to meditate. You have to just seek that advice in order for you to receive it.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, I could sit and talk to you for another hour. I'm just like fascinated. This is just beautiful where you are now after everything you've experienced and gone through.
Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. Gratitude is the feeling that I feel every day
Mm-hmm.
because I went from, trust me, a very successful life materially. I
Mm-hmm.
could afford anything I wanted. I don't make anything in comparison to that. But now my life is so much more content. So there's a true purpose, true contentment. I feel like I'm leaving legacy behind
No, that's
that's going
beautiful.
to outlast me, right? Like my goal is, this is not about my ego. This is about for this to be built so that it can outlast me and many generations after me and continue helping others as long as it's possible. And I think a lot of people lack the purpose and they try to fill it like I did with the acquisition of the condo
Yeah.
with things. And it could be material things, but it also could be things like being busy and going out all the time
Yeah.
or playing video games. You just fill your time, something that's, we call it God-sized hole that's in your heart.
Yeah.
But it really comes from that relationship with God, but also finding your purpose, because I do believe that every person is here for a reason.
I mean, I certainly believe that as well. And it is so true. And it's so, so many things that you've said are so interesting to me because, number one, as I always love speaking to people who were not born in the US because I obviously will never have the experience of coming to the US or experiencing the US as a foreigner since I was born and raised and have lived here my whole life. So hearing that and hearing you say, like, even the comment you made at the beginning about like, oh, there's like the US for all its flaws, it still represents this, this different life and this dream that so many people who don't live here have. And so why so many people want to come here. And then, hearing you talk about your journey and how you had, I mean, it takes a lot of strength to decide to deal with a trauma of that size and magnitude. And so, I mean, I hope that, along with your gratitude and with your happiness that you found, I hope that you also have you're really proud of yourself. I mean, because you've overcome so much and now you're putting so much good out. And I truly believe that you are helping anyone who comes across you. I mean, your energy through the screen is just like, I can feel it.
Thank you. Well, that's my hope too. Yes, and I am proud of myself. Everybody could do it, right? I think people would, but I also know that not everybody has the strength that God given me, and I don't take it for granted. He gave me a gift, and so I want to use it, for His glory and to help others and to inspire others to know that it is possible to change your circumstances, no matter where you are.
Amazing. Well, I mean, like I said, I could talk to you for another hour. I definitely want to have another conversation about the silent retreats because now I'm like, okay, I need to go do that as soon as humanly possible. So how can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you?
The easiest way, where everything I'm working on, including my book and the work with the homelessness, is on our website. So if you go to cpnworldwide.com, that's where you find all the information.
Amazing. When all of Anna's information will be in our show notes. And Anna, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for being such a positive influence on the world and everyone you come across. Everybody who's listening and watching, thank you so much for being here. As always, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Let me know what you think. I love hearing all of your feedback and comments. And Anna, you're the best. We will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.